hard thing to do, by the way, here than to know this from Brian and me, the technology people, and make it happen. We chose this room, Irene, so you would see our view. And it's just the right size for us, as it turns out. I invite you to share a box lunch with us at noon after the end of this session. And if you have friends, invite them. We've got 50, and I don't know, we've got 50 people. So hang around. We thought it would be a good hour for conversation, generally, and the food. So this session is going to feature our provost, Wayne Bott. Some of you heard him speak at 9 o'clock. I'm not going to say much about you because you're well known here.
It's safer that way, right?
It's for the best.
I was starting to think, what's he well known for? We'll talk about that, yes. Wayne comes out of the University of Missouri system, and in his position there, he worked with Steve Graham, who's a senior consultant for Triangle Associates, a consulting firm specializing in higher education. He was senior associate vice president for academic affairs at the University of Missouri system for almost 20 years. He's published papers on academic quality, cultural and organization changes in higher education, leadership development, and manager coaching. His current research efforts focus on the dramatic changes occurring in higher education and their impact on traditional public universities. So our main point this hour is to have a conversation. So we've got 2 fine lectures already, but now we'll talk more about the issues that are critical to us. I'll let Wayne open the conversation, and then we'll see where it goes. But this whole symposium is meant for interaction between us and the speakers, and our hope is that we'll have a better university as we talk about this. Irene mentioned universities always have tensions between faculty and administration. It's a complex issue. Well, let's talk about those tensions, and let's see what our best ideas are. So that's Ann Arndt, former university faculty president, just walked by with a big smile on her face. And I think that was because she saw us working here. So
Very good. Thanks. I'll just get started quickly, and just on behalf of President Tuminez, I'll send her regrets that she could not be here. She wishes she could be here. She had a presentation ready to deliver. She is trying, as presidents do, to be in 3 or 4 places at the same time, but she's not here because of some personal issues. I don't want to release those, but if you knew why she wouldn't be here, you would say, I perfectly understand. It's not in any way an indication that she doesn't take this matter seriously or that she doesn't want to be involved in the conversation. So President Tuminez was to be here to talk on this panel, so we've kind of on the fly kind of made some modifications. Instead of her, you'll have Ren and Stimpy. We can figure out who is who to lead you in this conversation. I've known Steve Graham for some time. Shortly after becoming the department chair, he headed an academic leadership program through the University of Missouri system, and so got to know him through that, and had worked with him on a number of different issues over the years pertaining to academic governance, leadership, faculty challenges, and those sorts of issues. And so I've watched him work. I've seen him, in fact, deal with some unique, challenging issues, particularly around controversial things like faculty conduct, post-tenure review, things that can really hit hot-button items with faculty, and he's been able to navigate those. And I thought that having that outside perspective and someone who's been in the trenches and helped navigate that terrain between academic, senior leadership and faculty is important. And I think that it is true that you point out there are tensions between faculty and administrators. I would also point out there are interesting tensions between faculty and faculty on most college campuses. So there, see, they're right there. So I think it's one thing, obviously, that we have to keep in mind, and administrators do, is that there isn't always a, quote, faculty voice. There are faculty leadership positions, faculty senates, ways in which things get channeled. We also have to recognize that there's divergence of opinions about almost anything. If you put two faculty together, you'll probably have three different opinions on how to manage that. And so it's an interesting and an exciting environment to work in. I think our conversations, hopefully, I think what I had, some of the comments that I had made, I think they are very in line with the rest of our conversations today. As a matter of fact, what I didn't get to in my talk and was highlighted was, issues about academic freedom, the importance of academic freedom in the university setting, and to recognize, that it is one of the things that we should recognize is the incredible protections we have as public employees at a public institution, and constitutionally protected, court-recognized rights to speak as private citizens on matters of public concern. And I strongly support that and certainly encourage you. We always encourage you to speak with your legislators, to address issues that you feel that are important, and encourage you to do so. And so there's clearly opportunity for that, that you should feel some comfort in addition to tenure itself, to be able to, that there are laws in place that protect you in speaking in those regards. And then one of the things we'd have to think about, I think, are the limitations of academic freedom, or what constitutes academic freedom. Sometimes we will hear, faculty, while you have control over your classrooms, there are things that can go in the classrooms that clearly don't constitute or aren't covered by academic freedom. I've had faculty, not here, but in previous institutions, who were complaints about making what were racially insensitive jokes or things in class. I had them talking to them in my office. They said, I have academic freedom, and I was like, I guarantee you that this does not under the umbrella of academic freedom. You can be dismissed for it. So anyway, there's those issues and how faculty take ownership and responsibility. And then the last thing I had on my notes I didn't get to are the roles, rights, and responsibilities. And I think that some of that has already been covered, the things that I had in particular, in which faculty have primary oversight over curriculum, classroom instruction, promotion, and tenure decisions. And so we've highlighted some of those issues today. And so I'm going to shut this. So I'm not going to, read through my notes. We want to have a robust conversation. And Steve was asked to kind of give some comments?
I'm just going to make a few comments because I really like it when there's an engaged discussion back and forth, and I know everybody's been really patient. I love the two talks we had, but you guys haven't had a chance to talk and hear from you, so I really feel committed to do that. I'll do this very briefly. I would say that pretty much what Wayne and Irene said about shared governance, I would agree with. I think it's all important. I would just add a few other footnotes. One, I think it's kind of a learned skill. I think a lot of the things that have to do with building trust and getting what I'll call muscle strength over time, that there takes practice to get it right. As Scott mentioned, 30 years, more than 30, more like 35 as a faculty member and administrator, both at the campus level and at the system level. And I taught all the way up until I moved to the system, and then I continued to write even as a vice president. What I do think is that it really focuses on trust, and my experience is that the better and more robust the faculty senate or the faculty council, whatever you want to call it, is, and the more diverse the group is in terms of backgrounds and expertise and respect on the campus that they've earned, the better they do, and the better the system works. And so I would have to say over the last several years, some of the best things that I were able to accomplish were things that they backed into, if you will. One of the things that I'm most proud of what we did, so I worked at the system level with 4 campuses, and then we had kind of a super faculty council that had 3 representatives from each of the 4 campuses for a dozen. And they reflected the views of the faculty and then also then to the general officers, which was the vice president, and to the board. And in many cases, what we found work is we set up a process and we said, everything we do, because we were at policymaking level, has to have full vetting. And by that, it had to go through IFC. We had a parallel body that was the provost and vice provost that represented sort of the provost offices, and then the general offices, which are the vice presidents, and it cycled all through that. So whatever group brought it up, it had to go through those other links too. And what we found is that then there became such a great bond of trust that in many cases, when issues would come up with the provost, their answer was, let's see what IFC has to say first. And that was the Intercampus Faculty Council. And when we got to that point, that's where I felt really confident that we were really working it. There are a lot of times there's back and forth. I kind of served as liaison, and I remember many times I go to the provost and said, I can't sell that to the faculty. Other times I go to the faculty and say, I can't sell that to the provost. And then we would meet someplace in between, and I think that resulted in a pretty significant rewrite of the post-tenure review regulations. We drafted a standard of faculty conduct, which was actually both of those were led by IFC. A number of rule changes and policy changes, but I think that when we went forward with a lot of those policies, oftentimes the more controversial ones, we had the faculty council IFC representatives there to kind of co-present to show that they had a role. So we need to hear from you, but I think it's practice makes perfect, and I think it really takes a lot of building of trust and whatnot in order to do that. So questions, conversation.
My name is David Moulton. I'm a faculty anthropologist. Provost, while I've not met you, I've been here for 20 years, but I was sick with leukemia when you arrived, and due to other obligations, I've not been able to come here. So I applaud you for having us. I've been here for quite some time. This image that you brought here today, and you said RTP committees. That is to say, if I paraphrase you correctly, and if I don't, please correct me. I think I heard you say that the RTP committee's role is to serve as representatives of the university, even recognize their importance to the university. I have to disagree with that, sir, with all due respect, because I think it's actually misspoken and misstated. The primary responsibility should be to policy. That is to say, to the RTP documents of the department, of the college, and of the university. My reasoning here is that when you say to the university, since you're the representative of the university, or President Tuminez is the representative of the university, that can easily be interpreted as loyalty to you, or loyalty to the institution, i.e. an authority, state authority becomes the issue, and that's a problem. It's not an authority. This is a sphere of academic independence, and so it's to the principles, to the policies that are set up through the iterative process that's in place, and it's to those processes that RTP committees must have loyalty. Where I, as a president of the AUP, the same problem we've had here at UVU is that when administrators, and by administration I'm actually including the RTP chairs and RTP committee members, when they don't adhere to policy, and it's very easy to read that. Oftentimes you see it's as if they didn't even know policy to read it. And yet, so I'm going to emphasize again, I think, and forgive me for my disagreement, but I think the key here is actually the policy and the need for everybody in that process to adhere to policy and to recognize the proper role of a provost, the proper role of the president, the proper role of the board, the proper role of the dean, the proper role of the chair, and also the proper role of the university.
Okay. No, I think that's a good clarification, and I didn't mean it in the sense that I don't think I am the university and the faculty are not. When I'm thinking of the university, I mean collectively that you are, and honestly, the faculty are more the university than the administration or anything else, is that when you come to UVU and the experience that you're going to get, it's an experience that comes through the faculty. And all I meant by that statement is that when the RTP committee is coming together, it's thinking about my department, my programming, the university, the faculty, and now it's kind of a shifting from, because sometimes what we will see are, it's almost like the RTP committee thinks its role is now to be a cheerleader or promoter of that faculty member. And certainly there's a component of that, especially if you have a really outstanding faculty member. The real role is, I think you're right, compliance with policy, with the criteria that are in place when you're doing the evaluations. All of those things have to be weighed. But what the RTP committee's responsibility is to do is to now do a very thorough review of that candidate's credentials. How are they doing in their teaching? Does it meet our expectations? Is that person, in terms of the quality of the education that they're providing for the university, going to enhance our university or not? And I'll say this, I say to the Board of Trustees every time that we meet for these, and we do tomorrow, is the meeting that the trustees will make these decisions. We're making multi-million-dollar decisions on behalf of the university that will shape how this university looks 20 years from now. And so I just think that's an incredible responsibility. And it's one that I do agree. It's the primary responsibility, as you talk about the rights, primary responsibility of the faculty to take that role so incredibly seriously. And so when I read an RTP file, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, I can talk to you about the process, how it works, how Kat Brown kind of, she is the faculty affairs person. She goes into great detail with all these portfolios, and we're dealing with, if you look at tenure, promotion, and the midterm evaluations, this year we had almost 100 portfolios to review. It's an incredible time endeavor to go through those. I read every letter that's written. I don't go into the level of detail that she goes to, because that's what I rely on her to do. She'll flag the portfolios that I need to pay particular attention to. So I read each of the letters, looking through and make sure that, is this a solid evaluation? Have they hit anything? Is there a problem that I need to kind of look into more deeply? But largely, if the letters are solid, the review has been good, by and large, it was a question that came up, Irene brought it up, is that largely we should be going with the faculty, and in tenure cases, again, we do. I think this year there was, of the recommendations I made out of 29 cases, only one in which there was actually a negative recommendation. So I've done a 15-year history. I wanted to see how consistent we're being with faculty recommendations, and I think we're in the 90% range. So there will be those offs, but usually it's making sure that we're conforming to policy, everything's in line, it's been a thorough review. Are there anything that I need to make a decision about? And then it was raised, the issue of if we do make a decision, to provide detailed explanations. And I think in a couple of years ago we weren't. We are now, and did certainly this year. I think anybody that was not recommended for either tenure or promotion had at least a 2-page, if not longer, letter explaining any decision that was made. And sometimes those were in alignment with faculty recommendations and things. So we're trying to do exactly that. But I do want to say that I don't think the RTP committee is acting on behest of the administration. They are acting on behalf of the university, understanding you are the university. So that's what I do.
So if I want to, Stephen, just in the interest of picking up the sound, do you mind just pulling that out?
Oh, sure. It's not picking up on. Go ahead.
I want to follow up on David's focus on the policy. So you suggested in your talk earlier that faculty, in some cases, aren't being rigorous enough as they're evaluating their
Thank you.
their colleagues. And I'm sure that's the case. You gave an example of an RTP committee that gave
Very minimal.
Well, that's problematic. That's on the faculty. But by policy, somebody who's coming up for tenure is judged on the RTP document from their department.
Correct.
And the question isn't, will this enhance the university? And the question isn't, this is $1 million decision, we need to make it on some other grounds. We need to make it on the basis of that original document And so we should renew them every 5 years or so. I think that may be.
That's policy,
as well.
yeah.
But here's the problem. I've been on 2 different RTP committees over the last 5 years. So we revised our document, and it's better than it was. That's the point. And then we send it to your office. And 9 months later, 11 months later, we get a response back that says, this is not what we're looking for. Well,
Oh, on the
what
documents.
are you looking for? And so then we try to think through it, and this is what happened next. We turn that one in, and then 6 months later, we get a response from your office. It's Kat who's organizing that. And it says, a faculty member can't know exactly how to achieve tenure on the basis of your document. And so it needs to be quantifiable. Every issue must be quantifiable. And we think, no, that takes away our judgment. Then you get 20 boxes and somebody you don't want to give tenure to fills all the boxes, or somebody who should get tenure misses one. So we make that argument. We figure out ways to quantify. Our dean has worked. This is hard for deans too. That they have to work with this. And so we send in one with maybe some quantifiable things, but still an argument that these judgments aren't quantifiable. And then a year later, we get a response back saying, maybe they don't have to be quantifiable after all. This all happened. I'm not fictionalizing here. People are nodding heads all over here. And then, where are they now? And whose has been approved now? And why should the approval be based in your office? Okay, policy says they must be approved.
Right.
But it's our primary responsibility, that our documents. And in the meantime, we may be giving tenure recommendations on the basis of policies or documents that we're not even happy with.
Yeah, because they haven't been.
I'm trying to make it more complex than what
Yeah,
you respond.
Right, it is. And I think dealing with some specifics, I can try to address those. I think in general, the idea is that, faculty should be writing and have primary ownership of these documents. I don't think it's an either or. When I'm saying you're making decisions that are best interest of the university, those documents show the expectations for what a faculty would need to achieve to be for the best interest of the university. So they should be linked. It shouldn't be, okay, we're doing this over here and here's another document. There should be, I think, clear guidance. I am a proponent that a faculty member coming in should have a good general roadmap, a good understanding of where I need to go from now until 5 years from now when I submit my portfolio as to what they're looking for. I don't think it should be mysterious, hidden. It should be pretty clear. Not everything is quantifiable, as you say. You can't say, okay, well, otherwise, you don't need an RTP committee. You just have an algorithm that says, you checked off these boxes. And there's quantitative, qualitative decisions that have to go in there. And I think all that should primarily rest with the faculty in making those evaluations.
And I just want to add a footnote because it was in regards to your comment as well. And so I'm not going to cycle around what you described. I call bring me another rock. Oh, that's not it. I'll know it if I see it. It's kind of an engineering term. So it's very frustrating. And so I'm not commenting on that. But I will say that the points that you made are ones that are probably common at all universities. Is like, how do we write those standards so that they are clear to the faculty members, both for promoting to professor as well as to tenure, at the same time giving us some clarity about where we have subjective decision, and then also working really hard. And a lot of times that means having campus-wide decisions, because the struggle we're having is that the president has said, I think the department standards need to match the college standards and need to match the campus standards. I don't think you have a campus-wide committee here, but in trying to align those so that we have some, so that's a struggle, I think, everywhere in terms of what the tension that you mentioned. we don't want to make a checkbox, we don't make it quantifiable so that any, we have to have a subjective decision, but I think that's really, once again, that's practice and practice, and I think that more conversations you have with young faculty to give young in their careers, give them feedback about how they're doing, feedback at the annual reviews and 3-year reviews and stuff, but you're right, it is, it's worthy of the most important discussions that we have on campus, in my mind, because it is probably the most important decision that we make. And for a lot of the points that you made in terms of, we got to take this really seriously because it's the foundation of all the rest, the cards tumble if we don't. But it is hard, and I think it's common in other universities. Now, the cycling that you described, I'll leave that to Wayne to try.
Right.
Okay.
Can I pass the mic around for folks asking
Oh, for
questions?
sure.
I don't think so. Let me know if you can.
Hey, how about somebody that hasn't talked yet?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Well, thank you. So I'm Chris Phillips, and I'm an associate professor of philosophy at Southern Utah University, kind of co-founder and co-president of the union down there. And I appreciate your framing earlier, Provost, in terms of the P&T stuff, so kind of picking up along the same lines, where you were sort of suggesting that by having a rigorous process, you can then go push back against the sort of legislative forces that are suggesting perhaps we need to get rid of it, or it's unimportant, or something along these lines. But at the same time, I have a slight worry regarding exactly how thorough you expect faculty evaluation to be. And it's a prudential worry, not a principal worry. And the prudential worry is this, is that faculty are often, at least I'll speak for Southern Utah University, expected to do a tremendous amount of teaching, service, and scholarship on top of it. And so then to say to faculty who are teaching, say, a 4.4, or maybe some overloads and other sorts of things, okay, now here, I'll again speak for my own case, here are 2 1,000-page dossiers, for tenure files. Please read them excruciatingly carefully and write up a very careful and detailed and explicit report tied to policy in such a way that it sends the message up the line, in addition to teaching your classes and any other service committees, and do your scholarship, and hold office hours, and
Right.
and so it just becomes this thing where I want to be a thoughtful, advocate and evaluator for my colleagues, but at the same time, I have to balance 1,000 other things that are going on. And so I don't know, maybe you have advice, maybe you've done this longer, right, as to how exactly it is that we can balance this sort of careful evaluation with the needs and demands that pull on our time.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a challenging process, and we don't have external reviews here. So at institutions, when I was at UMKC, you also have, the issue of faculty sending their portfolios out for external review and getting faculty at other institutions who have these same obligations. And often it's for free, or you send them some token gift as a thank you for that work and effort. This gets into this quantification. I don't have a checkbox to say, okay, you've done, how many sentences, how many words are in there. What I think the review should be careful. I think it should be thorough. It should cover all the basic issues. It should be somewhere between 2 paragraphs, which I have seen here. And I didn't see this last year, so I think that we've done a lot to get RTP committees to recognize their role. And another 50-page document that none of us have time or want to read as well. Somewhere in the middle, there's this golden sweet spot, which makes you feel that the committee has taken time, they reviewed the portfolio, they've identified the strengths. I think importantly, they've identified any potential limitations or concerns. And I've told committees this, is that, if there is a problem, you should address it, not okay, let's not talk about that because I don't want to deal with that. No, it should be brought out to the fore, it should be in the document, and the committee should say why this is or is not a concern that should weigh against or for that person's application. So my sense is, yeah, I'm not asking you to do or expecting to see that thorough of a review, but I'm expecting to see something that feels like it's been fairly comprehensive. And there were some really good ones. Actually, nursing is here. I'll just call them out again. I was taken aback. I mean, their reviews were, I think, 3 or 4 pages, but they were very nicely done. I was like, wow, I'd like to make this available to people so they can see what I'm talking about. But then you're like, well, this is someone else's tenure portfolio, so I can't just exactly post it on the web. But maybe to try to get some examples out there of what we mean so that people have a bit of a template. But again, it varies so much. So we're such a broad school in terms of having trade programs and associate degree programs and masters, and so there's a good bit of variation, and we have to be responsive and reflective and recognize how they're evaluated is going to vary a little bit differently if you're in the philosophy department versus you're in tech management or something like that.
What you describe almost seems impossible, so I hear you, okay? And that's where I would say, once again, I have the luxury of saying this is what we do that works, and there may be people at our institution say, well, not exactly quite as nice as he suggests. But part of it, too, is simplifying the portfolio a little bit in terms of what goes in. 1,000 pages, I'm going to say it's too much, okay? I've had to review them myself, and there's just so much you can read. And I know that one of our campuses, for example, has gone to more of electronic portfolios that I think at first faculty squawked about that, but now they get to see the feedback at every level, which I believe is really critical to see the work of the committees as they go up. I would be a strong advocate, and I don't know if this plays well here or not, but I do like the external review, the idea that you have independent reviewers from that field that can make a kind of an unbiased judgment about it, which then makes your job easier because you can rely, if once again the trust is there, on the work and their assessment, which then means you can shorthand a little bit. Like I said, I also do like trying to, even though I understand there's very different requirements, whether it's philosophy or performing arts or even studio art versus a chemist, all the standards for scholarship and creative works are different. But those bodies, those learned societies are often pretty good at judging things. Like if you look at music and art and some, the jury panels that they use. And I think then we have to be able to trust in their judgment about what works. And so I like matching stuff from the department to the college to the campus so that we know we're all in sync and that we are all looking out for what's going to be the best for the entire university. But what you described sort of sucks. I wish I had a better word, more articulate. But you can simplify those things too, because they're nasty when they're that long, because they don't help you.
Yeah, I kind of want to bring it back to the RTP committee issues because, first of all, start with positive. I've been on the re-envisioning GE committee, and I don't think you can say one institution is all perfect with faculty governance and another university is terrible at it. I've been in situations that have both. The re-envisioning GE committee, that's when everybody on it learned there are different faculty voices, and what we came up with was a distillation of a lot of different faculty voices. That said, back to what Scott pointed out, I think at the opposite end of the spectrum is the process around formulating RTP documents. I think probably everybody who's faculty in the room has felt some frustration with that. The timeline, we send something off, wait 6 to 9 months, no indication of when we're going to hear back, and then suddenly we hear back and we get a 2-week deadline. We were actually threatened with losing a search if we didn't complete it. We had 5 deaths of relatives in the faculty. We had 3 COVID cases while this was going on. And there was no sympathy extended, no exceptional care. We were told, well, you'll lose the search if you don't get it back to us. This is an example, a case study of dysfunction, I think, in terms of faculty shared governance. And what I want to ask is, when we have this level of dysfunction, how can we fix this and how can we improve this? Because this is the albatross around a lot of faculty's neck right now.
Yeah, I agree that this is something that's been a priority for me. It's been a priority for the president, get these resolved. not to point, you know, I was kind of surprised when I got here because every department's RTP criteria is supposed to review it every 5 years. When I got here, there had been a 10-year period in which none of them had been reviewed. And some of them were when we were a state college that were in place. And so we're a different institution than we are now. And I know Matt North took on a huge onerous responsibility. Faculty Senate was working. We're working to get these things completed and pushing to make that happen. Once we get through this phase, then we'll start the recycling process of every committee, you know, every 5 years. And I do want to get certainly Faculty Senate, faculty involved in how we can make that more effective, more responsive, and deal with those. But it's kind of like a tidal wave of trying to do them all at once and 50 some odd RTP criteria. And I think that's caused some of the delays that otherwise wouldn't have been there. But we also couldn't have started a 5-year cycle because that would be, some departments would go even another, you know, 5 to 10 years before they were getting done. I think that we're getting close. Hopefully we're getting close to getting that resolved. If not, I'll again actively push to do so. You know, we can deal with the specific issues. I think the larger question is how and what do you, what do you think in terms of faculty at large? You know, one of the things that Steve has pointed out is that we do have Faculty Senate, which has a committee that does kind of provide a review of portfolios as they come through, but we don't have a campus-wide promotion tenure committee as many institutions do, and that creates, you know, an added layer of faculty governance and oversight over these processes. And so some of that might be thinking about who's on and what committees are looking at and how we can effectively manage that. But my position is, no, it should be the faculty and the departments with the expertise should be setting their criteria. They should be benchmarked against our aspirational peer institutions or operational peer institutions as it should be, so that we can see what's going on there. Some of the one criteria actually this semester we were looking at, I was like, well, the publication record should be commensurate with peer institutions. And then I was like, well, what does that mean now for me looking at it? It's like there's no number or anything, and you can't. I was like, well, do we call around different schools? What's been done there? So I think that having some level of quantitative expectations, but recognize that we are benchmarking against our peers, and particularly the type of institution we want to become, and let faculty articulate, write those, and take ownership and responsibility for it. And then we become, from the provost's office, what I think that our primary responsibility is to be a resource and facilitator of effectively helping faculty to achieve those particular ends.
I'm concerned about your description of the process. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
So you've got 100 or however many.
I'll talk over lunch.
100 or more things to look at, and you pointed out they come from nursing and they come from
Everywhere.
so many different departments. How can you possibly make a judgment based on an engineering portfolio? You're not an engineer, and Kat Brown's not an engineer. How can you possibly judge but you still turn some down. And how can you possibly turn them down? On what grounds could you turn them down, given that you don't have the professional understanding of them? And President Mulvey made a really good argument to that effect. Administrators don't know the field.
Right. Well, and it's going to depend on the individual portfolio. Not every portfolio comes in unanimous across the board. There will be oftentimes divergent opinions about those decisions when they come to our office. And so our office, by policy, is required to make a professional assessment and a recommendation that moves on. And ours is just it is a recommendation. It's not a decision. My office doesn't. Only the Board of Trustees actually makes the final decision. What we're looking at just is to ensure that the portfolio is the documentation consistent with what's in the RTP criteria? have the evaluators accurately, appropriately evaluated. So I'm not reading a journal article and making a determination as to whether this is a good article or not. I'm not qualified to do that. But if the criteria were that, well, you have to have X and X doesn't exist, we can make that determination and judgment. Or if, there's something that has been missed. So we are charged to make those decisions. We do make those recommendations. We do read them. We do them in alliance with the criteria that are in place. But it's not, and even at universities where there is a campus-wide RTP committee, there are often people who are in affiliated fields but not necessarily in that discipline. And they make decisions. And so it's not unusual that happens at any university across the country, is that people who are educated and familiar with academia can make assessments of the portfolio without saying, this is a top journal, or, you can't make that because there are ways of evaluating the journal quality, but we're not evaluating the quality of a particular article. We're trying to see if it aligns with the criteria.
Is there, and once again, I'm asking questions, but is there a reason why you don't have external reviews as part of the portfolio?
My department sends it out for external reviews. Ours does.
Okay, so some departments do, but it's not.
It's not a university requirement.
Just for scholarship, we don't do it for the whole portfolio.
Oh, okay, so they just look at scholarship, not at the whole package.
And that's just a couple of departments
Okay,
do that.
okay, because, and once again, there's pros and cons to that. I think we send it out the whole portfolio so they can look and see what the teaching load is in contrast to the scholarship and stuff. But once again, that's really good advice because you're right, those people are experts in the field. Once again, I'm just going to advocate for a campus-wide look because there are people that gives it a better overall look to see if the standards, because you could have a department that has a very different set of standards, not different notions of scholarship, but very different standards than the larger college or the campus, and to try to bring some consistency. And then it also serves, so if you have, I'm thinking of a case, let me just do this real quickly, where once again, at our place, where the argument is, well, they're going up too early. And how early is early? And is it, then do they have to meet a higher standard because they're going up early? And actually, one case that just went through got some pushback because this person had the stuff, but there was a disagreement at the college or department level that they were just going up too early. And fortunately, the rest of the campus-wide committee gave a 9-0 vote in favor of this candidate, okay, because she had the stuff, okay? I like that other interpretive look, you know what I'm saying? So it does add some layers to it, and it does kind of clarify things. But when I saw the letter from the committee, I thought, damn, that's going to be hard for anybody to argue with when a body of campus-wide makes a judgment call like that, then the whole issue kind of dissipates a little bit. But once again, that's all in the process, and it's working it. It sounds like there's probably some rough edges right now. Well, and you're also the school's in transition, and I'm talking about this, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roth, for your comments. If our colleagues don't mind, may I ask several questions from Dr. Roth, if you don't mind?
What's he going to do?
First of all, I've been teaching here at UVU for 33 years. So most of our colleagues here have not been here as long as I have. So I have worked with several administrators. To this day, we do not have an approved RTP policy. How could an administration? I don't ever remember having an approved RTP policy. How could an administration make a decision when they themselves reject, just like our colleagues mentioned? We have gone through, for instance, the most recent version of our RTP policy twice. We have addressed every comment that Dr. Brown has made and you have made, we have addressed them. He came back again. Our colleagues spend the entire summer for work for free, work on the most recent version of the RTP policy and the comments that Dr. Brown had made and you had made. And then he came back again to check. So how, why, and how would you make a decision on a candidate or a portfolio when you do not approve a policy? It doesn't make sense to deny somebody tenure when you yourself do not approve a policy. Based on what? We do have a university policy, yes, but university policy does not address all the issues.
How do they make a yes decision?
As you know myself, right?
How do they make a yes decision then?
Now, I can show you on the letter that I received from your office, and I used with my colleagues, one of my colleagues who applied at the same time as I did. I used the same criteria that he used. I asked him, I said, would you give me that copy that you have? Because that's actually your letter from your office says Masood used unapproved criteria. And then for my colleague, you said he used approved. Where does the consistency come to play? Why is it that the same criteria for me is unapproved, and for my colleague who applied at the same time as I did, that one is approved?
Yeah,
It's not a great system.
Yeah, we could tune this.
yeah. Our conversation needs to be, I mean, I can't.
Does this work? That would,
Very specific question on a specific case, our conversation need to be a real high level. I think there does need to be consistency in the application of the policies, and where there isn't, that would need to be addressed if that consistency exists. The fact that we do have some unapproved, and particularly, and again, I think this is a historical artifact of the type of institution we were, that we have so many departments without criteria approved for rank advancement. But then the question would be, well, how can any department make a positive recommendation for, much less turn down a case that doesn't have approved criteria? That has to be solved, and it has to be solved immediately. And I've asked Kat, and Kat is working to make sure that happens. But I think that going back to the larger question is, it's one in which there should be faculty input, that should be faculty driven, and our office should be facilitating the conversation so that the faculty are setting the standards for faculty in terms of their productivity, and then holding faculty accountable to those standards in the review process. And as long as that's happening, then I think you do have, it's not just the issue of shared governance, it's self-governance. It's faculty governing themselves over the area in which they have primary responsibility for governing. And then the only thing that I would say was, the idea that the president of the seat is the chief academic officer. At least, I mean, that may be the case on some campuses typically. And here, I think the the provost is the chief academic officer. So I'm the one that's working on the academic side and helping to manage all of these issues and working with faculty to really facilitate those processes. So that's a commitment that I will make to the faculty here to ensure that you have a voice and that you have primary control over the areas in which you have responsibility for. But I'm also, as the chief academic officer, and the trustees have made very clear to me, I have to make sure that I'm holding the faculty accountable to those principles and policies as well. So.
and I know this is a rub without saying the tenure and promotion policies and the nature of the policies and decision-making and all that, but I'm wondering, since that's taken up a large chunk of the time, are there other questions that relate to, just
Governance.
to be fair to those that, that relate to faculty governance, or shared governance, I should say? I think you should.
Thank you. I'm Lindsay Roper, Department of Biology at Southern Utah University, and also one of the co-presidents of our AFT chapter. My question for you, I bring this to you because it's a larger conversation that we're having at SUU right now about the role of shared governance and service evaluate faculty on criteria such as teaching, scholarship, service, right? These are kind of our three pillars. However, what seems to have happened in the faculty context is that service is now in addition to your job. So scholarship and teaching has literally taken up so much of the pie that service is now what you have to do outside on top of your normal working hours. And since really shared governance is service, how can we address this creep where maybe administrators are saying, faculty, you aren't involved, but they're not realizing that that is now being pushed outside of their working hours, that shared governance is competing with their families, with their service to their communities. How do we come back as basically as a university and say service is valued, it is part of your daily work, and how do we make sure it remains that way?
Because, let me try to take the light off. I think that's a really good question, and I think it's sort of a catch-22, what you described, and that is that faculty will do the kinds of things that they get credit for. And so if they don't get credit for service, then it tends to dissipate their interest in it, for sure. And once again, I'm kind of going as a guide for us, we kind of think of it as a 40-40-20. I'm not sure that same 40 for research, 40 for teaching, and 20% for academic service of all types. And so that would include you're engaged in faculty council or faculty senate, other types of faculty governance, but also service to the professions, the professional societies and whatnot. And then, depending on the university, it could include those things in the community. If you're a community engaged campus or whatever's, top important. Have you had those conversations about what portion of, and it's like 50-50-20 is what comes out?
Well, and I think one of the problems is that we're not realizing in teaching, we may say teaching takes 60%, but our current students now coming in because of the pandemic, because of other issues, are so far behind that 60% in teaching now is about 90% in teaching. And everything else is still meant to exist in that same proportion.
Yeah.
And so what faculty are seeing is you have to do service, but we're making you work more than that quote-unquote 40-hour week, right? Which we know none of us work a 40-hour week. That is not how that works whatsoever.
Right.
And so I'm wondering how the university can start to reimagine how we reward faculty for service and how we incorporate it into our work when that teaching responsibility is expanding.
For sure. One of the things we've done, and I don't know if this, this isn't an answer to that question, but for those that were in progress, for tenure, whatever, is we've had kind of a COVID, just as you would for parental leave or some things like that. We've given people extra years to extend the time. It strikes me the other thing is that to have those conversations, because my experience is that the whole faculty governance thing doesn't get shared that well. Let me just use the term shared governance doesn't really get shared. In other words, a small group of people take on a vast majority of the work because of interest, because of connections, because of talent, because of passion, whatever it is. And to have those conversations more transparently in the department, so when those obligations come forward, the classic people look at their shoes and they don't sign up. And I think to try to make that more transparent, even within your own department, and say, we have to spread this out. Because this is killing me, and I know it's easy for you guys to look at your feet when another assignment gets, then I feel bad and I take it on because I'm passionate about it. So some of those things too. And then perhaps maybe more conversations. I know, for example, for those faculty, in certain roles they get a stipend or a reduced teaching load, or in other cases they get support in the form of administrative associates or something that will have part of their assignment. They'll work in the chancellor's office, the provost's office, but part of their job is to support the faculty senate, members or whatever. So there's a variety of things that you could do that, that might lighten that load. But you're right. I think during COVID, it's made all of us kind of crazy because teaching isn't really teaching anymore. It's also mental health support, and it's also kind of trying to play catch up. And it's like, my passion and love is teaching in person, and all of a sudden now I'm doing, now the students also prefer some things online. I know we're having an issue where people sign up for the online courses, And then the on-campus courses that are offered are sparsely, you know, enrolled or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the open conversations, even in the department, which is, guys, it can't be just the three of us, you know? Or, does that help at all?
Yeah, you've helped.
Maybe.
In fact, you sat on a hot seat and you let us ask questions. That takes a certain kind of courage, and we appreciate your being willing to do this.
He's wrapping us up.
It's time for our lunch. We'll break now. The lunches have been served. And we thought of this hour as a conversation hour, where we can keep going in smaller groups, that sort of thing. So thank you very much.